My name's Lucas Pulley. I've been a friend of Cornerstone Church for over 15 years at this point, and it's been a real pleasure, honor of my life to come every couple years and spend a Sunday with you. What I do in ministry-wise is I work with networks of simple churches and networks of house churches, mission-oriented little small simple churches in major cities, usually nationally and globally. Most of those simple churches are trying to embed in populations where people are never going to come to church, and so we actually start little churches amidst them, among them, nationally and globally. But I'd love to be able to just continue in this At His Word series with you this morning. We are going to be in Matthew 9 this morning, which was just read for us, 9 through 17. And we're going to be thinking this morning about the conflict, the contrast, sometimes the incompatibility of the old and the new, the conflict of the old and the new. In 2011, 15 years ago, almost to the day, I convinced a woman against her better judgment to marry me. So been married 15 years. I've got 3 kids. We live over in Carbondale now. We just moved back. We spent the last 10 years in Tampa, Florida. Not many people move this direction, usually going the other direction. We spent the last 15 years married, and I realized, and maybe some of you that are married too, the first year or two of marriage was just this constant realization that I have a pre-existing set of habits, old habits built into my life, ways I do things, ways I understand things, ways I see things. And shocking realization, I married a person who has an alternative set of habits. They maybe don't see things the same way I see them, do things the same way I do them. And most of that first couple of years was trying to convince this new person in my life, my ways are better, objectively. They're correct, they're true, they're wise. And I'd like for you to convert from your unhelpful habits. I'm going to share with you 4 of them really quick. And I didn't even know the meaning behind some of these habits. They're just things I did just mindlessly and didn't realize there were other ways to do them. One was how to load the dishwasher. I did not know there were multiple ways to load the dishwasher. So I felt like the purpose, like the goal, the way to load a dishwasher was like a jigsaw puzzle. You just get it all in there. You know, everything has a place. You just got to move things. It's like Tetris. It's like a real-life, high-stakes game of Tetris. You just get it all in there. And then I remember first week we were married, came out, opened the dishwasher, pulled the front rack to get my coffee mug for my morning coffee, and all the coffee mugs were in one place. All the small bowls were in one section. The large bowls were in a section. The plates were lined perfectly at the bottom. But, really nice to look at. But there were still some dirty dishes in the sink because there was not room for them. What? Yes, there is. There's so much room in here. So I had a conversation like, hey, love the attempt. But there's a better way to do this. And she said, well, babe, when you load the dishwasher, none of the dishes get clean. And I said, well, you can't expect the dishwasher to go 100 out of 100. You know, you got to have a little grace for the dishwasher. I learned pretty quickly there were certain kinds of laundry I did not fold properly. Shirts and towels. I had a hard time figuring out shirts and towels. There was a new way to fold shirts. Towels, too. I would always go hot dog, hamburger, and my wife said, no, it's hamburger, hot dog, trifold. I said, trifold? What are we, packing a newsletter or something? These are towels. These are bath towels. My opinions on closed captioning changed drastically. I think there are people who love closed captioning and people who hate closed captioning, and they marry each other. This is how this works. So I've spent 15 years sort of learning to love closed captioning, and my reading speed has accelerated. I mean, I got a lot better. I was just trying to force this new marriage, this new thing, this new spouse. I was trying to force everything about this new thing to just fit back in my old thing, my old life, my old patterns. Always assuming that I was right and righteous about everything, that my old way was always the right way. And therefore to cram this new thing back into the old. But God was making us something new. And it was not my task to pull it into the old, but for the old to somehow adjust, be replaced, give way to something new. That conflict of the old and the new, and our pride sometimes in that conflict, our fear of change that can get in the way of that contrast, is similar to some of the dynamics that are exposed here in Matthew 9 as Jesus continues in his early ministry and early teachings. And I think not just to get it out of the way early and not to bury the lead, I think the aim of the text this morning is to help us see that Jesus did not come as a patch job, a quick fix patch job for good people to be slightly better. He calls sinners into an entirely new life. He is not a quick fix, a bolt-on, an easy solution, a patch to the cloth. He's not a silver bullet or something. He's actually a comprehensive change for sinners out of the old into the new. I'd love to pray for us briefly before we dive into the text verse by verse. Lord, we humbly come to your word, not as pages and ink, but as an instrument of your voice, a mechanism of your presence to us this morning. And so, God, we come to it wanting to hear from you, a word of encouragement, a word of challenge, a word of conviction, a revelation. God, we want to encounter you in the text this morning. It's in your name. Amen. Verse 9, Matthew says, as Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew. So now we're in autobiography mode here. Matthew is writing about Matthew. He's writing about himself. He saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. Jesus says, follow me. And Matthew got up and followed him. So that's one verse. Super clean, super simple, not a lot of details, not a lot of fluff, not a lot of drama. There's no like rising drama, climax, falling action. It doesn't read like a story. It's just a quick, simple, clean verse. But that verse would be so shocking to an ancient Near East Jewish audience. Completely shocking. Why? Because of who it is. Tax collectors were like sort of collaborative employees with the Roman Empire. The people of God are under oppression by Rome, under the thumb of Caesar. Rome needs to collect its taxes, a lot of times passed through a system through Herod. Tax collectors would actually be the ones assigned to a region to collect the taxes from that region owed to the Roman Empire, owed to the oppressors of the people of God. And so the tax collectors would be the ones entrusted to collect taxes on toll. That's what this toll booth would not be like an office or like a desk or something. It's like a toll booth. Like if you were in Chicago on I-57 and it's like, why does this happen? Why do I have to throw my quarters in this basket? It's like they're charging you for marketplace transactions, passage, anything that they can tax you for, they're going to tax you for. And then the tax collectors were not just trying to collect from the people of God to pay off the oppressors, but they could add on top of that tax a surcharge of whatever they wanted to provide for their own means, their own base pay and profit. And there was no like regulation of that surcharge. Tax collectors could just say what it is. So that's why tax collectors were seen as exploitative, abusive, extracting value from their neighbors to enrich themselves. They were seen as greedy. They were seen as liars. They were seen as thieves. But worse than that, when they were encountering like the religious class or people that had like a high view of the people of God, they were seen as idolaters in betrayal of the God Yahweh because they had aligned themselves with the purposes of Caesar. And Caesar was always making theocratic claims that Caesar is Lord, Caesar is God. So it was a person who was working under that claim, in solidarity with that claim. So, greedy, thief, liar, betrayer, idolater. And as soon as it says Jesus walked up to Matthew at the tax collector's booth, a Jewish audience would be sitting there saying, here it comes. Get him, Jesus. Get him. Rebuke him, admonish him, tear him down, shame him, embarrass him. Get him, Jesus. I can't wait to see what happens next. And Jesus says, follow me. Join in. Come along. Come along. You belong. Not just in this emerging kingdom family, this new thing that God is doing, that I'm announcing, the kingdom is near, the kingdom is near. Not just that you're included, but I want you to be on the ground floor, the foundation. I want you to help with it. I want you to work with it. It's already shocking for Jesus to interact with him at all. It's beyond the pale, inconceivable for Jesus to actually invite him, include him. Verse 10, while Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house. Well, now we're dealing with all these social norms being burst, ceremonial laws being broken, social laws being broken, cleanliness rituals being required, becoming unclean before the community. And who else was in Matthew's house for dinner? Other tax collectors, many tax collectors, not just one. One was bad enough. Now there's many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. We're just throwing a block party with the worst people. Verse 11, when the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, Jesus' disciples, as anyone would ask. This is not an unreasonable ask. Why is your teacher eating with these people, eating and drinking with these people, with tax collectors and sinners? They're all making themselves ceremonially unclean. They're going to have to go through not just the inconvenience of ritual cleansing, the time, all this kind of stuff, constantly, by the way, every time they do this, but they're also going through the shame, the embarrassment, the isolation. And it's not just that. Guys, this is reputational sabotage. If their little emerging mission together, what the Jewish people would have seen as like a little revolution that they're sort of catalyzing here. If their little cause was going to succeed at all, you would think they would care about social status, power, influence, that people would take them seriously, that people would respect them, listen to them, see them as wise. If you cared about any of those things, this is the last thing you would do. You would not do this if you cared about those realities. And Jesus, on hearing that question, why do you eat with these people? And Jesus overhears it. And Jesus says in verse 12, it is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. And then Jesus turns into a little bit of sarcastic Jesus moment. It's my favorite. He says, you go learn. You go learn. In Hosea 6:6, when it says, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. You go learn that from your own text that you guys talk about all the time. You go and learn. You call me a teacher, asking about your teacher. I'll teach. Go and learn. When God says in Hosea 6:6, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. And then he returns back to his original point, for I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. Jesus clarifies that his mission, his intent, his heart is to the desperate, the needy, the broken, the hungry. But he sneaks in there between the first point and the last point. He sneaks in there a little rebuke of the religious. That word, when he says, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, when he's hearkening back to Hosea 6:6 and that whole story in Hosea. That word mercy in Hebrew stands for chesed, which means loving kindness. It translates to loving kindness. He's essentially saying, God is saying to his people through that text, he's saying, I desire a people of loving kindness. I desire a people who embody my love, my mercy, my heart, over and above a people who actually observe all the ritual sacrifices, but forget the first part. I desire a people who embody my loving kindness, my heart, who live that out above and beyond, rather than a people who observe to the dot ritual sacrifice. It's the same kind of line that's echoed in other places in the Old Testament. It's not the only place that Jesus could have brought into this conversation. He could have talked about Amos 5, where the prophet Amos is saying from the words of God to the people of God at the time, I hate your songs. I can't stand the music. It's driving me insane, but let justice roll down and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Would you please embody my heart and my loving kindness in the community? I can't stand the religious practice, the shows of piety when you're not actually living out my heart, my character in the community. Could have talked about Isaiah 58. Isn't the kind of fasting I have chosen for you to loose the chains of injustice, to set the oppressed free, to help the hungry, the naked, the homeless? Isn't this the fasting I have chosen for you, the kind of fasting I've chosen for you? Jesus starts to echo these same kind of themes. Not just here, but in other places where he calls the Pharisees whitewashed tombs, right? You guys remember this? Where he explains them as like really clean on the outside, really nice, really presentable on the outside, but void on the inside. Void of what? Void of the heart of God, the loving kindness of being God's people. Mercy, to be a people of mercy because we're in touch with the mercy we've received. A people of grace because we're in touch with the grace we've received. And without that, we're somehow dead inside, like a coffin, like coffers. He even says to them, woe to you Pharisees, for you have tithed your mint, your rue, and every other garden herb, but you've neglected the higher matters of love and justice and mercy. He says, you guys tithe your whole spice rack in the kitchen, to pulling out 10% of every little spice and giving it to the temple court system. But you've forgotten what it means to be generous, a generous people who care about love and justice, a loving, kind people. Years ago, I was living in Tampa the last 10 years, and about 30 minutes down the road, there's a seminary. It's in Lakeland, Florida. There's a seminary. It's called Southeastern Seminary. And several years ago, there was a student at Southeastern, newish student, like 19 years old, that sent me an email and said, I have a project for my class. I don't even know what class he was in, what class he was taking. He said, I have a project for my class. I need to interview a Christian leader. Somebody mentioned your name. I got your email. Would you mind having lunch with me? And I just ask you some questions about Christian leadership, Christian ministry. I said, sure, no problem. Where do you want to meet? He said, I'll come to your neck of the woods to make it easy for you. I said, that's fine. But guys, my neck of the woods, I was living in the inner city of Tampa Bay in an 895 unit Section 8 housing village. I was living in the projects. Like on purpose. My wife and I were doing like a inner city neighborhood outreach and lived in the place where we were doing outreach for 10 years. So I said, all right, come on over to my neck of the woods, man. So, and in our neighborhood, one of everybody's favorite restaurant was this brick building about 2 blocks from my house. Nowhere to sit inside. It's just a kitchen inside of a building, and it had a hole cut in the wall where you would just walk up and you'd order deli sandwiches. They're like $5. Any deli sandwich you want, $5. It's called Gene Anthony's. If you're ever in Tampa, go to Gene Anthony's. So I said, meet me at Gene Anthony's. We'll talk while we stand in line, because the line's going to be so long by 11 or 11:30. We'll have our meeting while we stand in line. So he comes over. We're standing in line. It's like 2 blocks of a line waiting for sandwiches at Gene Anthony's. And when you're in line at Gene Anthony's, the whole neighborhood comes out of the woodwork. Everybody shows up. And so we're in line, and I had been involved for many years in a little simple church ministry there in the inner city of Tampa Bay that was planting churches among women who were coming out of the sex industry. A lot of times human trafficking victims. They were living in sort of monastic sisterhood communities. They were finding stable employment, stable housing, all this kind of stuff, and they were sort of living out the life of the church in the streets together. So because I was helping with that ministry a lot, I was very well connected to a lot of the women in the streets. And I was standing in line at Gene Anthony's, and this group of 5 pretty obviously prostitutes came to get lunch. And they came walking up, and they saw me, and they said, Pastor Luke, oh my gosh, Pastor Luke's here. We're so excited to see Pastor Luke. And this 19-year-old kid next to me said, I'm going to get something from my car. I'll be right back. And he said, I'll be right back. I just have to get something from my car. And he left. I talk with these women for a second. They go get in the back of the line. As soon as they leave, he comes back. I said, you okay? He said, yep, just had to handle a thing. I said, no problem. And then this group of 4 or 5 guys just tats all down their legs, like cigarettes out of both sides of the mouth. These are guys that lived in like a a community that was on our block. It was a sober living community. They were coming out of either addiction, homelessness, or long-term incarceration reentry. So a lot of these guys were 10, 15 years incarcerated. And these guys come walking down the street, they see me, they said, "Yo, P," because they can't be bothered for more syllables. Pastor Luke. I don't even let people call me Luke, but in that neighborhood, you call me whatever you want. And so they said, "Hey, P." And they come up, and as soon as they walk up, this 19-year-old kid's like, "No, there's something in my car. You go check my car." And so he leaves for a little. I talk with these guys. He eventually comes back. I said, "Did you leave anything else in your car?" He said, "Nope, we're good. I got it. It's under control." And then the last thing that happens is these kids that are between the ages of like 14 to 18 came walking up. Their pants are at their knees. They're literally open carrying 9mm in their pants. A lot of these kids were gang involved youth, and we had a microchurch that was called Urban Fellowship, a simple church that was called Urban Fellowship that was working with gang youth. So I knew a lot of these kids, and they came walking up and they said, "Yo, Luke," because they don't ever say the word pastor because of the power dynamics. They're like, "We don't submit to anybody." So they just called me Luke or whatever. And they said, "Hey, Luke." And they all came walking up. And again, this 19-year-old kid's like, "Something in my car. Need to get out of here." He goes to his car, deals with this thing. These kids go to the back of the line. He came back and I said, "Listen, man, what is going on? What is going on?" And he just really vulnerable with me. He just said, "Listen, I'm brand new in seminary. I'm trying to I feel called to a career in ministry. I'm right at the start line of a career in ministry. If I'm seen interacting with people like that, I just have no idea what the church I'm a part of would do, the staff of that church, the leaders of that church, my professors at Southeastern, my classmates at Southeastern. I just have no idea how I would explain to people why I'm in this interacting with people like this in this line." And I just said to him, "Listen, I don't have a seminary degree. I don't know Hebrew or Greek or anything like that. I'm sure that's awesome. I'm just going to teach you one thing. You're going to learn a lot in seminary. I'm so glad you're there. I'm just going to teach you one thing. Do not waste your life on people who would judge you for standing in this line. Do not do it. Waste your whole life on the people in this line. Spend every ounce of it on any person who is in touch with their need, their brokenness, their hunger. Give the best of your pastoral leadership, your gifts, your attention, your presence to people like this. Don't spend your life on people who would judge you for being in that line." Jesus did not come as a quick fix patch for the already decent, the people who are already good. He did not come as a little patch job for the already good Pharisees to be slightly improved, slightly better, to deal with the minute challenges that they face. He did not come for any person who would say the words, "I'm fine. I'm good. I don't need help. I've got it under control." Guys, he came for the thieves and the drunks and the depressed and the manipulators and the idolaters and the addicts and the weeping and the weary. He comes for every person who would say, "I'm not fine. I need help. I'm not okay. I do not have it under control." He comes for every person who comes to that conclusion, "I need help." And as soon as the words flee your lips, here he comes. Here he comes. But he does not come to be a patch job, not a quick fix or a bolt-on solution to our minor problems. That's what he gets into with John's disciples in verse 14, when John the Baptist's disciples came and asked him, "How is it that we and the Pharisees fast often, but your disciples do not?" That's John the Baptist, committed, sacrificial, in the wilderness, locusts and honey, wearing skins, desperate for revival. This is not like the religious elite or something like that. This is John the Baptist disciples that John told them, Jesus is the real deal. Go follow him. He's the one we've been waiting for. That's why they're still around in this scene. So I don't imagine this being like a public confrontation like the Pharisees do. I think they're sort of pulling him off to the side like, "Listen, Jesus, we get it, but we're super committed. We're all in. We're team Jesus. Don't hear this the wrong way. But the Pharisees are fasting a lot, and we fast a ton. We've been eating locusts and honey for 2 years, and you guys are eating steaks with the tax collectors and the sinners. It's getting weird, man. Like, you guys are just partying. Locusts and honey is not a lot. Can you meet us where we're at a little bit? Can you help us understand this? We are constantly fasting. And Jesus answers them in verse 15 saying, how can the guests of the bridegroom mourn while he is with them? The time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them, then they will fast. Here's what he's saying. Imagine this wedding for a second. There's like a father of the bride that just shelled out half of his 401k to buy a full course meal for 200 guests at the best venue in town. Feast is on me. I want a party. Servers put that delicious meal on everybody's tables throughout the whole room. Music is blaring, and the father of the bride looks out, and not a single person is eating that meal. And the bride and the bridegroom look out and think, what is happening? We're not even celebrating right now? And you go out and you ask, why aren't you eating? And everybody's saying, sorry, we're fasting. I'm so sorry, we're fasting. DJ kicks up the music, dance floor, all these lights or whatever. Let's try to get the party started. They kick on Cupid Shuffle. Let's get the party started. And nobody comes out because they're busy praying. There's no one to slide to the left or slide to the right. See, a wedding is not a time for fasting and praying. A wedding is a time for feasting and partying. Essentially what Jesus is saying is you're fast. What's the reason of the fast? You got to remember the reason of the fast. Why do you fast? What's the purpose of the fast? We fast in desperation for the Messiah. We fast to get connected to our own yearning of our hope for the Messiah to come. And he's saying, that's exactly right. That's why we fast. Guys, guess what? I'm right here. I'm right here. Why? I'm right here. Why would you? The reason of fasting is to hope for the Messiah. I'm right here. Let's feast. We're together. There's going to be a time when the bridegroom's taken away. Fasting will continue. I'm right here in front of you. They'd grown accustomed to fasting, but they'd forgot the meaning of the fast. And fasting no longer was attached to a deeper meaning. It's what we do. This is what we do. It's what it means to be us. It's what it means. We start to evaluate each other based on it. Who's in and who's out? Well, it depends on if you do this stuff. Who's good, who's bad? Well, it depends on how much you do this stuff. It's what we do. It's who we are. They were committed to an old thing, and they were encountering a new thing in Jesus. But they were trying to pull Jesus to fit him back in that old thing. Can you just help us understand why you don't do the old stuff? And here's how Jesus answers, verse 16. He says, no one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment. No one takes a little piece of cloth that's never been through the dryer 30 times and tries to sew that new piece of cloth on an old shirt that's been through the dryer 20 times. Because that new piece of cloth is going to shrink and it's going to tear it back open. It's going to make the tear worse. Verse 17, neither do people pour new wine into old wineskins. Why? Because new wine hasn't fully expanded yet in the fermentation process. So new wine, when it gets pulled into new wine skins, which was like sheepskin, the new wine skin was flexible, and it would, as the wine would ferment and expand, the skin could actually stretch with it. But over time, those wineskins would lose their stretchiness, and they would become brittle. And if you tried to put new wine into an old brittle wineskin that hasn't expanded yet, and that new wine starts to expand in an old brittle skin, what's going to happen? It's going to burst. And the wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined. No. People pour new wine into new wineskins so that both are preserved. Jesus is highlighting the incompatibility of the new with the old, the contrast, the conflict of the new with the old. And he refuses to fit within the confines of old covenant expectations, within the emergent social dynamics and implications of those old covenant expectations. He will not simply be bolted on to old traditions, old religious practices. He is doing a new thing. Now, we might not be first century Jews. Might be one or two in here, first century Jews. We might not be first century Jews tempted to patch Jesus onto the old covenant. That might not be us. But we are 21st century followers of Jesus who are still to this day tempted to patch Jesus onto our old lives, our old plans, our old expectations. I just have two invitations for you this morning. Some of you might be newish to following Jesus. Your commitment to following Jesus might be brand new, or it might just be within the couple last years, and you just sort of feel like you're still in learn mode. Some of you might be new to following Jesus, and when you're in that place, you might be tempted to fit Jesus in to your old life, to bolt him on, to patch the tear. That was me right before I went to college at SIU. I won't tell you what year that was. But a week before I went to college at SIU, I started following Jesus. Not great timing. Needed a few more days to figure that one out. And I moved into Maysmith Tower, and I was just like, I'm a brand new follower of Jesus. And I had basically come out of 5-6 years of substance abuse in a way that was destroying my life, got in some like legal trouble, and I just could not, and I knew I needed to get it out of my life. I needed to transform. I needed to change. I needed to turn a new leaf, and I just could not do it. I tried everything. I couldn't do it. And I was studying the book of John all summer long before I came to college with a group of, college-age guys in a basement. We were just reading John, and I just became convicted through the scriptures. I'm a sinner. I'm actually powerless to lead the changes in my own life that I need. I don't have the strength to do it, the wisdom to do it. I don't have the resources to do it. I don't have the commitment to do it. Because I am fallen, I'm actually sinful. I actually need outside help, and the only outside help that's available is Jesus. He's the only one qualified. He's the only one who has the resources to do it. He conquered death. He's the only one to do it. He actually has promises and resources that nothing else in the world has. I'm convinced that he's the Savior, not just of my death when I die, but like of my life right now. So I surrendered my life to Jesus, came to college, and I just sort of decided I needed Jesus' help with my substance abuse addiction, but I got everything else under control. And I basically just tried to patch that tear. I tried to just bolt him on and just say, help me with this thing. I don't really need your help anywhere else. I feel like my relationships are just fine. My way I see myself and others is just fine. My language is just fine. The way I use my words and tear people down, there's no problem. The way I use resources, no problem. My life plans and my pathway, I've got it figured out. Everything's fine. And it took me, constant relapsing and headache and deathward pathways for like a year to realize, I can't actually just bolt Jesus on to this dead thing. This dead thing has to become like entirely made new. And that's what he's inviting from me, not just a piece of me. He wants all of it, all of it. Is that you this morning? Tempted to give him a little piece of yourself, a little side of yourself? Not the whole thing. Give him your whole life. You can't spill that new wine into an old wineskin. He's making you new, a new wineskin to hold the wine of his love, his grace, his presence, his union with him. The other invitation is that some of you have been following Jesus for a long time. Some of you have surrendered entirely to the leadership and lordship of Jesus years and years and years ago. Long time ago, you surrendered. But for people like that, the temptation is to remember back to a time in your life when you felt like God was really at work and the movement of God was so present in your life and around you, and you felt so alive with God, and people around you were sort of waking up to God, and it was like this really powerful season. And to close your fist around that season and try to pull everything in the future back to it. And to think everything always has to be that way. And the only reason why I don't experience God now is because we've strayed from that old thing that we used to do, that old way of life, or those relationships, or those habits we had, or those songs we sang, or the way we gathered, or the things we did, or the people that were there. That old thing is where God was, and where we erred is we left it. And we just need this new thing that feels clunky and God's not active in it. If we could just yank it back to be like that old thing. As there's always a risk of the fresh movement of God, the fresh activity of God, what God is doing in your life and in your midst right now. There's always a chance of that thing being squelched by people saying, let's just stick to what we've always done. Let's go back to the thing that we did before. Let's stick to the old wine. It wasn't that bad. Let's get back to it. Friends, may it not be so with us. May we be ever humbly open to what God is doing right now and tomorrow and next week and next month and next year, and not forcing that new thing that God is doing to look a lot like a thing from the past, a thing that's old, but to journey with him and to go where he goes and stay where he stays and listen to what he's doing and say what he's saying right now, tomorrow, next week. Because Jesus didn't come as a patch job for good people to be slightly better. He calls sinners out of the old into the entirely new. Let me pray for us. Lord, thank you for this family of believers nestled here in Southern Illinois, obsessed and hungry and desperate for you to advance and you to be at work in our families, in our neighborhoods, in our workplaces, in our street corners, in our sports leagues, in our marketplaces. God, we are hungry for you to be at work. And so, God, two things. Lord, keep us in touch, please. Keep us in touch with our own brokenness, our own need, our own desperation for you, our powerlessness, God. Apart from you, we can do nothing. So, hold us in that desperate place. Keep us there, Lord. And help us to entrust to you our entire lives, every single bit of it. Not one little piece, not one little drawer, not one little aspect, but all of it. And to be constantly wondering, looking, thinking, God, what are you doing in and around us now, tomorrow, this week, this month, while being grateful for the ways you've been at work in the past, but hungry to follow you now. It's in your name. Amen.